The sunlight hit the iron gates just right, warm, sharp, and almost blinding. The air smelled faintly of citrus and new pavement. I stood there with a small paper bag pressed to my chest, the weight of the oranges pulling gently at my arms. Their skin was still warm from the morning sun, smooth and glowing, as if they carried a piece of home inside them. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 68 years old. A retired nurse who still forgets she no longer has shifts to rush to. It's been years since I last saw my son, Daniel. Too many birthdays. Too many unreturned calls. And yet, there I was, standing in front of his mansion, not to ask for help, not to reopen old wounds, just to say hello, just to bring him something real. I told myself it wasn't a big thing. Mothers do that sometimes. We show up with food when words run out. Still, my hands trembled as I pressed the gate buzzer. The little red light blinked back at me, like an unblinking eye deciding whether to let me in. I could hear the faint hum of traffic far away, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder than you want them to be. I didn't come for forgiveness or attention. I only came to see my son. But as the gates slid open, slow and mechanical, a strange feeling rose in my chest, the kind that whispers you're stepping into a story that no longer has a place for you. The morning light slipped gently through the kitchen window, resting on the old wooden table and the basket of oranges I'd gathered before breakfast. The air smelled sweet, sharp, and alive, like it always did when the fruit was ready to be picked. That tree has been in my yard for more than 30 years now. I planted it the summer Daniel turned 5. He helped me dig the hole, though help mostly meant splashing water on my shoes and laughing when I pretended to scold him. I can still see him sitting on the porch steps, legs too short to reach the ground, watching me peel oranges in one long spiral. He used to clap when I finished, without breaking the strip. I always saved the last piece for him. It became our quiet little ritual, something small but ours. Back then, the world felt simple. Love didn't need big gestures. It lived in the things we did without thinking. Lunchbox notes, bedtime stories, scraped knees, patched up with patience. When his father passed, I worried the laughter might leave the house. But Daniel was strong. He had this spark in him, ambition even as a child. I used to stay up late grading nursing reports, and he'd sit beside me with crayons, pretending to do grown-up work. Sometimes he'd fall asleep right there at the table, cheek against my arm. I'd look at him and think, this boy will build something beautiful one day. And he did. Just not the way I imagined. As he grew older, that spark turned into fire. College, then business, then headlines. His voice changed. His clothes. His eyes sharper. More focused. I still have a voicemail from him somewhere. The one where he said, "Mom, I'll call you back next week." That was almost 4 years ago. The calls came less and less. The holidays shorter. The excuses longer. Still, I couldn't bring myself to feel angry. Success makes people busy. Distance makes people forget how close they once were. But I never stopped watching from the sidelines, his interviews, his speeches, those glossy photos in magazines. Every time I saw him, I whispered a quiet, "I'm proud of you," even if he couldn't hear it. Sometimes, when he smiled in those pictures, I thought I caught a flicker of the boy who once believed the world fit inside our little kitchen. This morning, as I picked the ripest oranges, I thought of him again. I wondered if he remembered how we used to share them. One slice for him, one for me. Maybe he still could taste that sweetness somewhere deep inside, buried under the noise of his new life. So I packed a few into a small paper bag, wrapped them in a soft linen cloth, and decided to visit. Not to fix anything, not to demand anything, just to bring him a piece of home. Because sometimes love doesn't need an invitation, it just needs a door that's still willing to open. The driveway curved like a ribbon of marble, spotless and wide enough to fit a dozen cars. A fountain rose in the center tall, glittering, extravagant spilling water that caught the afternoon sun like liquid glass. For a moment, I just stood there, the small paper bag of oranges pressed close to my chest, feeling strangely out of place. Everything about this house seemed designed to impress, to announce arrival. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. Each step echoed faintly against the stone, a hollow sound that reminded me of hospital corridors, clean, cold, and too quiet. My knees ached a little, but I kept moving. When I reached the front steps, I hesitated before pressing the bell. The chime rang out, crisp and polite, the kind of sound that didn't belong to home, but to hotels. It took a few seconds, long enough for my heart to start its old nervous flutter, and then the door opened. Daniel stood there. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The man in front of me looked taller, sharper. His hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored within an inch of perfection. Confidence rolled off him like cologne. The little boy who used to run barefoot through our yard was gone, completely replaced by this polished version. He looked at me not with surprise or joy, but hesitation. His eyes scanned my face like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. And then, softly but firmly, he said my name. My first name. Evelyn. Not Mom. I froze. I smiled without meaning, to a nervous reflex, waiting for something more. Something warmer. But instead, his body shifted. Subtly. Almost instinctively. Blocking the doorway. His voice dropped lower. Measured. Careful. Not now. Not like this. The words weren't cruel. Just distant. Professional. Like a man managing an inconvenience. Behind him, I caught the sound of laughter. Music. The clinking of glasses. Voices floated from deeper in the house, cheerful. Unaware. Someone called his name, and he glanced over his shoulder before looking back at me. There was something like panic in his eyes then, as if I were a mistake that had arrived at the wrong time. I opened my mouth, ready to say it's all right. I just wanted to see you. But he was already closing the door. The sound of it, that soft, final click, echoed louder than any argument could have. I stood there for a long moment, my breath caught halfway between a sigh and a sob. The bag of oranges felt suddenly heavy, the handles cutting into my fingers. I turned, slowly, stepping down the stairs. The world around me too bright, too clean. I wanted to go home. But before I reached the gate, something caught my eye, a narrow path curving along the side of the house, half hidden by hedges. Without thinking, I followed it. I followed the narrow path around the house. The sound of my shoes soft against the stone. The hedges curved like a green wall, hiding me from view until the path opened into a quiet corner of the estate. There, I stopped. The mansion's tall windows stretched from floor to ceiling glass, so clean it looked like air. Warm light spilled through, golden and soft, brushing the edge of the night. Inside, people moved easily, smiling, laughing, glasses catching reflections of chandeliers. It felt like watching a movie through a window, beautiful and far away. Then I saw him. Daniel stood near the fireplace, surrounded by cameras and polished faces. A banner glowed behind him, his company logo. Bold and perfect. He looked effortless, charming, in control. I waited for him to notice me, to turn, to see me standing there just a few steps away. But instead, he lifted a microphone and smiled at the crowd. His voice clear, confident, rehearsed, drifted through the glass like a memory I barely recognized. I caught pieces of it, his story, his struggle, how he built everything from nothing. He spoke about growing up in shelters, about not having a home, about the mother who never stopped believing in him. And then he said it. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. He turned toward the woman beside him. She was elegant, older than me, but dressed with quiet grace. Pearls at her neck. A soft cream sweater, the kind that looks gentle even under bright lights. The room applauded. She smiled and lowered her head modestly, touching his arm as though she'd raised him herself. For a second, my mind went completely blank. I thought maybe it was some misunderstanding, a sponsor, a friend. But then I saw the way he looked at her. How he said my mother again. Smiling wide as the cameras flashed. Something inside me cracked. The paper bag slipped from my hand. The oranges rolled out across the stone, round, bright, alive, scattering like marbles. One split open against the pavement, spilling juice that ran sticky and sweet between the cracks. I just stared. The scent of citrus rose around me. Too bright for the moment. No one saw me. Not him. Not the cameras. Not the woman pretending to be me. The sound from inside blurred together laughter. Questions. A voice asking how proud she must be. She nodded. Practiced. Perfect. And I stood outside in the cold, realizing I no longer existed in the story being told. I gathered what I could, a few unbroken oranges, my trembling breath, and walked back toward the gate. I didn't cry. Not then. The bus ride home was quiet, except for the soft creak of the wheels and the faint scent of orange on my hands. When I got home, I placed the ruined bag on the counter, its bottom dark with juice. Then I went to the bedroom and pulled out the old tin box from under the dresser, the one that held Daniel's drawings. His letters. The pieces of a life we once shared. The metal was cool beneath my fingers. As I lifted the lid, I told myself something I hadn't said in years. I'm still his mother. Even if the world forgot. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the tin box open in front of me. The air felt still, as if the house itself was waiting for me to breathe. Inside lay the pieces of a life that no camera or press release could rewrite, a folded crayon drawing, a photo with his 10-year-old grin, report cards with my signature scrawled at the bottom. The paper smelled faintly of dust and time. I ran my fingers over each edge like tracing a scar. There was one letter I hadn't opened in years. Daniel had written it when he was 15. After a fight, the ink was messy. The words uneven. You're my root. Even when I hate the world, you keep me standing. I read it twice. My hands trembling, not from sadness this time, but recognition. That boy had once seen me clearly. Now I understood what had happened. He hadn't erased me because he was ashamed of me. He erased me because I didn't fit the story, the glossy, heroic version that sold better than the truth. He didn't bury his mother out of hate. He did it out of convenience. I sat for a long time, letting that truth settle. Then, quietly, I decided this wouldn't end in anger or shouting. It would end in proof. The next morning, I found a name pinned to the community board, Micah Boyd. Private investigator. Discreet. Experienced. Fair? That was enough. We met at a diner off the highway. I told him everything. He listened, took notes, and said, "Give me 2 weeks." It took him 12 days. When he came back, he handed me a manila envelope with her name typed neatly on the corner. The report was simple, factual, undeniable. The woman pretending to be my son's mother was an actress. No adoption record. No history with Daniel. Just a resume and a few old film credits. I thanked Micah, paid him from the small savings I kept for emergencies, and went home. There, under the soft light of the kitchen, I began to write, one by one. I addressed envelopes by hand to the corporations, the charities, the board members who had built their image on my son's story. Inside each, I placed a few photographs Daniel's drawing. Our old photo. A copy of that letter. And beneath my name, I typed a single line. If your brand is built on a mother's death, you should know she's alive. When I finished, I stacked the envelopes neatly in a row, tied them with a bit of twine, and carried them to the post office. The clerk smiled and asked if they were for a family reunion. I told her yes. In a way, they were. As the envelopes disappeared into the chute, I felt the quietest kind of power, not revenge, but truth finally set in motion. It started with an email. No greeting. No name, just a subject line that said, "Is this you?" I almost deleted it. But something made me click. The link opened a 20-second video. No filters. No edits, just raw footage from a doorbell camera across the street. It showed me standing at Daniel's front steps. The paper bag of oranges in my arms. The door opened. His hand reached out. And in one quick, undeniable moment, he pushed me back. The sound of the door slamming. The oranges hitting the ground. And the silence that followed, that was all it took. By the next morning, it had over 3 million views. They called me the forgotten mother. They called him a fraud. The clip spread like wildfire on news feeds, talk shows, podcasts. Analysts discussed maternal authenticity. Strangers wrote essays about love, pride, and erasure. His companies issued apologies. Sponsors paused campaigns. And his perfect image began to fall apart. I didn't say a word. Reporters left messages on my answering machine. Someone slipped a card under my doormat. Another woman waited in her car outside, hoping to film me walking to the mailbox. I let them wait. Instead, I went out back and watered my garden. The soil was soft that day, dark and full of life. The orange tree had grown taller than the fence, its branches heavy with fruit. The air smelled fresh, green, forgiving. I watched the leaves shimmer in the wind and thought how strange it was, the whole world shouting my story while I stood there in complete silence. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud. Either. Just steady. The truth had left my hands weeks ago, tucked inside envelopes and moving quietly through mailrooms. Now it was out there, standing on its own. People said I'd won, that justice had arrived. But to me, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like stillness, like something had finally stopped spinning. Every once in a while, I'd hear a car slow down in front of my house or see my name flash on the TV inside the cafe. I'd turn away. The garden needed tending. The orange tree needed pruning. There was life to care for. Even after truth had done its work, justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives softly like a seed pressing into the soil. Unseen, but alive. Waiting for light. And when it blooms, it doesn't ask for attention. It just grows. The phone rang at 3:07 the morning. The sound was sharp in the quiet, slicing through the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. I was already awake. Sleep. These days came and went like a shy visitor, never staying long. His name glowed on the screen. Daniel. For a long moment, I just watched it ring. Then, slowly, I answered. His voice came through rough, strained, the voice of a man who'd forgotten how to ask for help. He said the press was tearing everything apart. The board was pulling out, sponsors freezing accounts. He said he didn't know who else to call. His words tumbled over each other. Half apology, half plea. Wrapped in panic, I stood by the window, the phone against my ear, and watched the orange tree outside sway gently in the moonlight. Its leaves shimmered silver on one side, dark on the other. I remembered planting it from a seed, small, fragile, full of hope. He kept talking, his voice breaking in places, asking for money, For time. For forgiveness disguised as necessity. And for a moment, I almost felt that old pull, the instinct to step in. To fix. To carry him one more time. But then I realized something. He wasn't calling his mother. He was calling his last option. That truth settled in quietly. Like dust after a storm. I didn't say much. I just listened until the silence between us grew too heavy to fill. Then, gently, I let it go. The call ended. The house went still again. Outside, the orange tree moved with the wind. Steady and alive. I stood there until the sky began to pale, feeling not empty, but free. It's been 2 years now. The mornings come softly, sunlight filtering through lace curtains. The kettle humming on the stove. I start each day in the garden. My hands deep in the soil. The scent of oranges and rosemary drifting in the air. The tree has grown taller than the fence. Its branches heavy with fruit. Sometimes I think it remembers everything I've forgotten how to ache for. Twice a week, I volunteer at the community center. There's a little girl there named Sophie, curious. Bright. Always asking questions. She reminds me that love doesn't end, it just finds new places to land. We laugh. We share stories. And it feels enough. This morning, I placed 3 ripe oranges on the windowsill. Their color glowing against the light. I kept one seed in my palm smooth. Alive? Ready for soil. Love doesn't need to be remembered by the world to be real.